Hey book readers! Today I'm taking a moment to share some thoughts about the books I read this month. I'm chatting about everything from a sprawling historical fiction novel and a delightful space opera to a funny classic British novel from the 1800s and a weird YA fantasy novella. So let's get this party started. City of Thieves by David Benioff. Quick note that this was my second time reading this book and it was just as enjoyable the second time around. Set shortly after the Nazi siege of Leningrad in 1941, this historical fiction novel features an impossible mission. Two young Russian prisoners, Lev, who was caught looting, and a deserter named Kolya, are allowed to live, only if they track down a dozen eggs for a powerful Soviet colonel to use in his daughter's wedding cake. I love how such a low-stakes mission becomes a matter of life and death. The difficult part is that the city is in ruins, so Lev and Kolya have to go behind enemy lines to find eggs for a cake. Benioff uses this quirky quest to create a haunting atmosphere that switches between being gritty and realistic to giving off silly Hogan's Heroes type of vibes. The historical setting really just becomes a backdrop for a daring adventure, some dark comedy, and a brothership formed between two contrasting characters. This is still a 5-star book for me. Parts of it made me laugh out loud, others were heart-rending, and there's even a touch of romance as this wild goose chase turns Lev from a boy into a man. The Little Liar by Mitch Albom. I'm a big fan of Albom, whether he's writing fiction or non-fiction. This was the 9th book of his that I've read so far, and I plan to rank those 9 in the next couple months, so be on the lookout for that video. The Little Liar has a unique narrator. It's the personification of truth, who moves the story along going from character to character over the years. Albom tries things like this in his novels. For a lesser writer, it wouldn't work, but Albom pulls it off, adding a neat extra wrinkle to a book about facts versus fiction. I also like how the story unfolds. If you could get a bird's eye view of the story, the characters are first mingling together in the same place, and then there's this kind of big bang event, and they are all spread out geographically, then eventually they start slowly coming back together over decades until the book ends in a grand climax that ties up all the loose ends. One of the main characters of the book is Nico Crispus, an 11-year-old Jewish boy living in Thessaloniki, Greece in the 1930s. Nico is truthful to a fault, and that's used against him by a Nazi officer stationed in Thessaloniki, who tells Nico to let his neighbors know that the cattle cars are taking them to a new home where there's plenty of food and jobs. When he learns what he's done, Nico feels guilty for unwittingly playing a part in leading his friends and family to their deaths. Because of this deep shame, he becomes a pathological liar, telling lies about small, meaningless things even. 4 stars for this one. The book moves at a brisk pace as, in their own ways, the characters try to right past wrongs and achieve redemption, find forgiveness, move forward after trauma, and get closure with loved ones. The book spans several decades and settings, from Auschwitz during the Holocaust to Hollywood, with filmmakers, Nazi hunters, and secret identities all playing a pivotal role in the plot. Even after quite a bit of thought, it's difficult for me to put a finger on why it didn't quite reach 5 stars for me. Maybe it was just the difficult subject matter and frustration with a story about scars that just never completely heal. The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. I know the year has just begun, but this is currently in the lead for my favorite book of 2024. It's about a fun crew of characters on a wormhole tunneling spaceship during an extra lucrative but extra dangerous job. The capable but odd crew give off Firefly or Star Trek vibes, and Chambers manages to make you care about 8 characters all at once, in part because they each have some interesting social, physical, or emotional issue going on throughout the book. A couple of characters are dealing with strained parental relationships. One's physical health is declining because of a curable disease that they just don't want to cure, and a handful of them have some difficult love life going on. For instance, the ship's mechanic is in love with a bodiless sentient AI, and the ship's captain is in a taboo interspecies relationship. 5 stars for sure for this one. This is a crew I'd love to be a part of. Each member has something to contribute skill-wise, personality-wise, and drama-wise. Bonus points awarded as well because the ending made me tear up. I won't say if they were sad or happy tears, but it was a powerful final chapter. Tau Zero by Paul Anderson. This was recommended by a few of you out there in the book-iverse, so I decided to give it a whirl. The book has a neat premise. A colony spaceship on their way to a new home hits a small nebula, disrupting the functionality of their decelerator. This only gives them the ability to speed up and no real chance of slowing down or eventually stopping at a habitable planet. Of course, as they're accelerating toward light speed, time for them becomes dramatically different from time outside of the ship. They're whizzing by galaxies like they're fast food restaurants on the highway, and time for the rest of the universe is ticking by even faster. What happens is that the crew is not only tasked with trying to figure out how to remain socially and mentally okay during this trying time, but they're also trying to find a solution to their deceleration problem as they plummet further toward an unknown place in time. It reminded me of a large-scale version of Matthew McConaughey in the interstellar docking scene where he has to try and dock with a spaceship while it's spinning out of control and starting to get sucked into the planet's stratosphere where it'll burn up. It's not possible. No, it's necessary. 3 stars for this one. Honestly, I'm kind of disappointed in myself for not liking it more, but I can't say I cared a whole lot about the characters or the social dynamics. I was more interested in the plot and psychological effects this kind of accident would have on people. But the minutia of the scientific details made my eyes glaze over. Admittedly, this was hard sci-fi and it made me question whether or not this category of books is my thing. I thought it kind of was, but now I'm having second thoughts. Over the Woodward Wall by A. Deborah Baker, aka Shannon McGuire. This was a short YA fantasy book with fish out of water vibes along the lines of Alice in Wonderland, Dorothy in Oz, the Pevensies in Narnia, or Gregor the Overlander in the Underland. 2 children, Zib and Avery, are polar opposites in nearly every way. Boiled down to the basic, one's a free spirit and the other's a stickler for the rules. They live on the same street and are both on their way to school when the wall they're climbing over disappears and they find themselves lost in another world. Now they have to work together to get back home. For Zib and Avery, the quest means going against their nature by taking risks or practicing caution, being brave, or being scared. They come to terms with who they are, but also how they have plenty of room to still evolve as people. 3 stars for this one as well. In this strange place known as the Up and Under, there are kings, queens, men that are boulders, girls that are crows, and other unsettling creatures. And many of the beings here speak in riddles, so that's not annoying at all. It felt like the author was channeling her inner Lewis Carroll to a nauseating degree, and I'm all for quirky characters, weird worlds, confusing tasks, and interesting speech patterns, but this was just a tad too much of all the above. 3 Men in a Boat by Jerome K. Jerome. Thanks to one of my subscribers for recommending this funny little book to me. Published in 1889, it's a lighthearted tale of 3 men who go looking for an adventure. And it proves that no matter the century, people don't change and comedy is timeless. For instance, there's a man who reads about a type of sickness and realizes he must have it, or a character who despises people who do the things he always does, like wasting their time by sleeping in. Like I said, most of the quirks of these people still happen today. And 3 Men in a Boat gets 4 stars. This was an old school comedic expedition in the same vein as Mr. Magoo, or comic acts like Laurel and Hardy or the Marx Brothers. At times, the characters are incredibly eloquent or courteous, but it's all so over the top, it comes off as hilarious. Some of the characters are bumbling or think they're smarter or better than everyone else, when in reality they're oblivious and socially awkward. Although it's silly, it's also really well written, becoming poetic at times with flowing passages and almost mythical digressions. There you have it, the highs and lows of my January 2024 reading journey. Remember to like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments what books you've currently got your nose in. Happy reading!